and that's, I mean, Easton, yeah, you're not a mom. Maybe you identify as a mom sometimes. I don't know, but like, you know, being a parent, this is the most unique experience that I don't think compares to like anything else. And that's just being a caretaker, right? But then like being a mom and like growing a baby for 9 months or 10 months in my case, and then like birthing that baby and then raising, like that is the most bizarre, unique experience I've ever encountered. And so that's what this work is about. And it can't just be like, you can't just have a baby and then go, well, did that. Like there's a lasting impact on your identity and your purpose, and from that point on. So, and I'm basically tying those ideas and tying them back together with like the workforce and labor and things like that, blue collar workforce specifically.
So why don't you
do what?
Why don't you show us some of the work? Walk us through some pieces.
Okay, so I'll just start kind of chronologically here. I'm going to share my screen. So can you guys see?
I can see it.
Okay, this PDF is going kind of slow. Maybe I should have, yeah. Oh, good.
Yeah, it looks like it's working fine. So tell us about enlarge it a little bit.
So let me try to open it with. Let me try to open it with Google Docs and see if it'll open. All right, this is having an issue, unfortunately. I tested all this. What about this one? Here, we can look at all of them. Is this large enough?
Yeah. Okay,
cool. So yeah, so I started like this. So this body of work is titled Ritual, and it's a series. It's a series that I started like right after Fox was born. Fox is my son. Easton, you know that. But I was thinking about how like, so I've like breastfed and I'm still breastfeeding, which is a, really an integral part of if being a mom, or, if you choose to do that. And if you don't choose to do that, that's okay too. I'm not saying that's the only way you should like raise your kid, but this is what I chose to do. And I realized that like oh man, my body is not my own anymore, and it still isn't. And as human beings, we are sexual beings, and so like my identity is like between being a source for nourishment, and for my son was being compounded and confused with just also being like a partner, and like the sexual objectivity that comes with just being a partner. And so a lot of these, so let's take an example. So like this image up here, this is me and some hay, and you'll notice like here's my body on some raw hamburger meat, and like this is a salt lick block for cows. And so I was thinking a lot about like what are they called, farm animals, and how farm animals are used. They're domesticated, and we use them for a purpose. And a lot of times it's to just raise more of those animals, right? So we give them a certain amount of nourishment to keep on birthing. And so I thought that was kind of an interesting connection between like women and my specific experience of breastfeeding and nourishment, and then also like the workforce of a domesticated farm animal. And so like honey here is associated with bees, and they need that. Bees need honey to keep on living. So feel free to jump in and ask a question so I'm not rambling, if you have any.
Sorry, I'm totally muted. If you're talking about parenthood, Ella just ran through the building or through. Perfect. Sorry. All right, so I have a couple of questions. So when you were creating these pieces, this is where, to me, this gets kind of interesting, because this is where like a lot of times in art, we get really, we sort of isolate, or I mean, in academia, we call it create silos, which I hate that term. Mm-hmm. But the work that you just showed, like, is it performance? Is it sculpture? Is it a photograph? Like, it's really interesting line that's drawn there, or maybe it's that line in the sand that you are able to sort of push. So how did you decide to go in that direction with that specific work, like that type of image?
Yeah. Okay. So that's a great question. So those pieces, and I guess I can go back and keep them on here, but the pieces that I like, zooming in, hold on. I'm going to screen share. I'm going to do it. Share. So these pieces, like I've been thinking about this work for, I would say, like 8 months before I actually made it. And it took me 8 months to make this body of work just because of having an infant and the logistics of setting up a shot. And I always envision these as performative, like this. Originally the piece was, I'm going to be in a field, naked, nursing my son, and then I had another one where I was like, I'm going to be on my hands and knees licking a salt lick block in the middle of a field, kind of like a cow does. And like that's where the ideas started, and then it morphed into this, which is that's like how art works. It's rarely your first idea is never your best, and it should always evolve, so you can explore all options. But it's hard for me to like call these photographs because look, I'm not a photographer. I don't call myself a photographer. Everybody's a photographer these days, right? Because everybody has a phone, a camera phone. But I don't know the technical aspects of photography very well. And I consider these documentation of a performative act. Unfortunately, most shows don't recognize it as a medium. So it's a little, I'm in like this weird gray area where I don't really belong anywhere. But I don't know, they live as, and the way I get around this idea of photographs, they're not framed. I print them on adhesive textile. So they literally just roll, they stick right onto the wall. They're seamless. And so I feel like without having a frame, it takes away that preciousness. And then those images get thrown away after the show. So you see them once and they're done, unless anybody else, unless they can like get reused if they're in really good condition, but they're not meant to be seen as photographs. They're not meant to be bought either. Like I don't make sellable work, and that's okay. So I guess that's how I draw the line in the sand. I don't even know if that's a direct answer. I don't have an answer for it.
Well, no, I mean, I just find it to be kind of an interesting question. And then which, by the way, I'd like to add, anybody that's watching this, if you guys have questions, please post those questions to Facebook or to Instagram. And what we'll do is the wonderful Mike DeGiorgio is monitoring this, and he will post these to our chat, and then I can throw questions at Alex.
Oh, that's a good idea.
No, like the reason I asked that question is because it's, you and I have talked about this work for a long time, but there are points where usually when you and I talk about the work, whether it's you talking to me about my work and me talking to you about your work or whatever, like this is the first time I've seen like a cumulative body of things, because it's usually been sporadic. Like you might call me with a technical question about how to get through something. But, I think about like where we are, because there are a lot of artists that are out there that function with a vast array of media. And so whether it is, jewelry or photograph or performance, and they kind of merge all of that together. Like we live in an area where a lot of people think that art is, it's either a figurative sculpture, or it is a painting, or it is a print, or something like that. And, as functioning artists, we have to sort of have to figure out where we fit within those spaces. And like your work is interesting because it's crossing over into a lot of different places, because you've also been casting concrete milk bags and a bunch of other things. So I'm curious to see how this all comes together and functions as a whole, because it seems like your whole body of work that you're creating is meant to exist in a very specific type of space.
So it's funny you bring that up, because I have been like basically making work just to show all together. I see them as like they should be seen as like an entire thing all together simultaneously. They complement each other. They're all relative And I think the theme that happens across the board is time. Like there's an aspect of time. So I'm going to show you, these, I'm going to share this screen with you can you see it?
Yeah.
All right. So these were, so these are plaster cast milk bags, so breast milk storage bags. And I was thinking about just like how long it takes to, hold on, maybe I can do this. There we go. How long it takes, like the time that it takes to either nurse or pump. And so like I went back to work after 3 months after having Fox, and I had to start pumping. Like I had to go between my 3-hour classes and pump in my office, like really quick. And then I also had to take a break in the middle of my classes to pump. And otherwise I was going to be leaking everywhere, and like, that's not professional. So here's a detail shot, but like I was thinking about this aspect of how much time it takes and how time consuming it is. And like, I think I was thinking about how hard it was too, and I look back on it and, everybody's got their own thing. Like everybody's got their own challenges in life, but this one at this point in my life was my challenge. How do I balance being a full-time working, a professional artist, a professor and a mother, and I'm trying to nurse my son. And I think those things are just not thought about as much as I would like to see them thought about or discussed.
So can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So these are milk bags as well, right?
Yes.
Okay, so you're presenting the milk bags in 2 very different ways.
Mm-hmm.
So like the original images they're stacked on a crate. And like the weight of that image or the weight of that work is really interesting to me because it looks heavy. And it may just be the association of it sitting on the crate. And I mean, I know that you have to use a forklift or a jack to move those around, but the weight of that, like it feels very different than the other piece where they're, when they're put on a podium.
Yeah.
So, like
yeah. Oh, go ahead.
Anyway, I'm just, my question is, did those 2 work together, or were both of these sort of an experiment that one will supersede the other? Because I know that in the creative process, there's a lot of experimentation to see what works, what doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
Like this image works really well, or not the image specifically, but the installation piece, because I imagine this will be an install, not a photograph.
Yeah.
Of this, I mean, it feels like it's a burden. I mean, it looks like a burden. And I imagine the process of actually casting the plaster in the milk bags and then going through this is as much of a burden as it was to say pump between class, pump in the middle of class. That you're reliving that experience in a much different way.
Yeah. So it's funny that you see this as burdensome. Yeah. So the palette is meant to reference this piece is titled Stockpile, right? So breast milk is like worth its weight in gold. I mean, you can actually buy breast milk, and it's worth like $4 an ounce or something. I mean, it's crazy. And so if you can pump and if you produce milk, like you got a business on your hands, you're an entrepreneur. But like the stockpiling them and saving them, because you always need milk, especially if you're not at home, right? Like I had to go to work, so the babysitter had to like give Fox breast milk in a bottle. But the palette's meant to reference like that blue collar working aspect and that environment. And yeah, like the weight, right? Like heavy things come on pallets and they're moved around with a forklift. And yeah, you're right. This is a good point, is that even though I showed you guys photos at first, this is a sculpture. This is just documentation of a sculpture. So this piece is like 48 inches by 40 inches by 12 inches tall or something like that. And so this one, yeah, it does. I think this is a stronger piece altogether. So this one's titled 1 month supply. And on average, this is about how much for 1 month a lactating mother makes. So on this pedestal, that is, I believe, 19 inches by 19 inches. And then, you know, total, it's like 6 inches tall. These bags, you can fill up to like 6 ounces.
So that's the average for a normal person, or is that your average?
Yeah, that's an average for, I took an average of, I kind of compounded that information, and I took the average for any woman that's nursing or lactating, and then mine also to kind of throw it in there. But I want to make it universal. It's not just about me. This is about women in general, or mothers in general that deal with this. Yeah. But I mean, this piece this definitely like elevates it to a certain extent, right? It's on a pedestal. I'm kind of referencing traditional sculpture in a lot of ways, because that's how we view traditional sculpture, right? Is on a pedestal. But I think it's also showing him like the importance of it, you know, bringing a spotlight to that. So, yeah.
So I want to ask a question, because I think I know what your next work is that you're going to show.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm just anticipating it. One of the things that just like dawned on me is, so, you know, the thing about art is it's subjective, and there's certain people that have different appreciations for art. So who's your audience for this body of work? Because I know plenty of men that are out there that would look at this and say, I don't want to know anything about how much milk's got to be produced. I don't want to know anything about that.
Oh no.
I know people that are like that. It's unfortunate, but I'm curious about, like, I'm fascinated that, you know, that's the average for a normal human. I'm like, that's a lot. That's a lot of milk.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, so who's your audience for this? Like, who are you trying to like really drive this point home?
That's a real grad school question, Easton. That's put me on the spot, and thank you. I deserve it.
Aren't you a master of none, right?
I'm a master of none, except BSing my way through something. My audience, I don't think my audience is women that are nursing, because they know this is hard. They know that this is time consuming, or like parenting in general. I'm kind of moving away from just the nursing aspect, because I don't know, like I said, everybody's got their challenges, right? And I don't want to minimize any woman that has had a child that chose not to breastfeed. I'm going to say that again, because it's really important that is said. So I'm kind of moving away from just like this breastfeeding aspect, but I think it is an extremely unique experience that nobody else, you have no idea what it's like to do this until you've done it. So I'm just using my experience, but my audience, I guess, would be, it is, you know what, maybe it is men. Just people that are unaware, or like that. I always like to know what another person's experience is like doing other things, and I like to hear about those things. So I would say, yeah, I mean, all this stems from, all of this work stems from a comment that was made to me several years back by an individual that I was working on a project that involved like construction and welding, and a lot of like masculine driven associated tasks and jobs. What am I looking for? The word I'm looking for here is, anyways, jobs. Yeah, we're gonna go with jobs. And he said, I was making a suggestion or something, and he goes, look, sweetheart, I work for a living, is what he said. And I kind of just went, well, that's weird. Like, I work for a living too. And this is before I ever had a baby, right? Like, I was just a working professional that had worked in the field of welding. I was a welder and fabricator I sweat, you know, like I go in, I don't just sit at a desk job all day. Like I've done my duty and put in my time as a blue collar worker. And he said that to me, and that always stuck with me. And like, that's where this is coming in from, is the sweetheart, I work for a living. And I'm like, oh, you think you work for a living? why don't you try waking up every 2 hours and having something, you know, like tear your nipples off because it's so hungry. Sorry.
No, it's, I mean,
you know, it's true though. So my goal is to just make this seen as a form of work and how we value it in our society. That's my biggest thing, is that I don't think it's seen as work. And it is. It's laborious, it's time consuming, it's exhausting, it uses your nutrients, you're tired, you're hungry, and you have to be on call at all times. So
do you think you're conveying that in this work?
Do what?
You think you're conveying that in this work?
I hope so. I mean, it's not, you know, I don't go for literal. I am not a literal person. I'm going to jump to these nursing pads here. I would hope that I'm conveying it. I don't know. Am I, Easton?
Well, I think you are. Well, you know, the work that you showed, and see, this is the work that I thought would be next. And so that, you know, it's interesting to watch your work, or this body of work specifically, evolve, because the photographs, right? The pieces that were the performances that were documented, to me, seem to be they're highly sexualized. And so, and then, which is kind of interesting. And I know that was your intent. And then as the body of work grew into, say, the plaster milk bags, and then the quantities of a product that's created by, you know, a human, and then moving into, why don't you talk about this? Like, I think this sort of adds to the sort of like, are you really getting the point across that you really, or that's your goal?
Yeah, sure. So, so this body of this, I keep calling them bodies of work, but this is just another series. They're all in the same body of work. So I like to really dissect a theme or an idea as much as I can, and use, so if I'm working with this theme of breastfeeding and nursing, I'm going to look at every single material and aspect associated with it. So and I've got all sorts of things like stockpiled in my studio, not to make a reference to my other work, but so you got breast milk nursing bags. I've got tubing that's associated with like the pump. I have audio of my pump going from when I was pumping. And then I've got nursing pads. So that's what I mean when I say, like, I use as much as I can. Every part of the buffalo. And so this piece that's still in progress is our nursing pads that I've sewn together. I basically used a disposable nurse pad, made a pattern out of it, and then I'm stitching them, and they're all made out of shop rags that I ordered. So like auto mechanic shop rags and things like that are used to mop up messes. And on them, I have stamped from the day that my son was born until I'm done nursing, which I'm shooting for 2 years. It's like my goal. I have stamped every single time on every single day that I have nursed him or pumped. So, and I think the way to get this across is by quantity and repetitiveness and monotony. And it's like, it gets old, man. Like I've had several moments where I'm like, oh, I don't want to do this anymore, but I'm going to keep going. And it's supposed to like make that connection with clocking in, punching out, 8-hour workday to 9-hour workday kind of deal. So actually, the most recent, these up here, like this is actually on my floor behind me. My white balance is super off, so you can't see it, but like, this is where I'm going with it. And I just want to show, I think it's really important to see the failures of a creative process, because that's how you get to the good stuff. But before that, this piece is really starting to get to me, because I tried this and I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. It reminds me of like a conveyor belt, right? And so I'm always trying to make associations with blue collar workforce, with the labor force, things that we associate with work. But then I was like, yeah, I don't really like that. Here's how they look when they're all just in a line. They kind of look like receipts or punch cards.
Strung out.
Do what?
They're strung out.
Yeah, totally strung out, right? Like, tell me about it. But I was like, that's boring. They're so flat. I don't like it. This was the original.
No, go back up.
Okay.
So what I like about this for scale, you've got the kid's toy in the bottom right, and you've got the piece that's on the wall so we can see how large it is.
Shit, sorry.
Oh, lost it.
Sorry. I'm coming back.
But I think that for anybody that's watching this, like a lot of times it's really hard to get an idea for the sense and size of a piece.
Yeah.
Of work. Like, I mean, with the palette, we create, like we got that, but your photographs, like you showed us sort of the grid, but it was a PDF, but like that's a good size for, imagine a wall with all of that.
Yeah. I mean, that space between these three, I would say span 12 feet, from here to here. And this was the thing, like, this is how I had originally, and by the way, see how these two at the bottom are like underneath these outlets?
Yeah.
That is not how they're supposed to look. So don't look at that. But so it like references a calendar, right? Like this was actually set by calendar. So I started on July 26th. That's what this one says up here. And but I didn't like it. I was bored. I was like, this is boring. This doesn't look good. They're not crafted well. And I think that's what's important I kind of came to my, when I'm talking about like embracing this jack of all trades, master of none. This is not supposed to be a perfectly well-crafted object. I am not honing my skills on sewing nursing pads together. And
parenting perfect either.
Do what?
Parenting's not perfect either.
Hell no, right? I mean, yeah, like I'm making shop rags, and that's what they're supposed to be. Oh, it looks like we have a question.
Yeah, it looks like we've got, we had a question that was just a reminder for the title of the body of the work that you're working on.
So each series has its own title, but I'm really connected to that sweetheart I work for a living, and I feel like if all these were able to be shown as one, then that's the name of the show.
I mean, part of me feels like that's a really good title to stick with because that's what motivated this work.
Absolutely.
So
I got to thank that guy.
Yeah. The next question is, what keeps you motivated through all of it, be it motherhood and or your art? So, how do you continue that motivation to get to the next piece? So, I mean, you're talking about this as in, sections of a larger body of work. So, what is it that brings you to the next piece?
Creating breeds creating, right? And like, I think that's the biggest piece of advice that I was given, or they tried to drive into me in grad school, was make something, whatever it is, just keep making it. Even if it's an awful idea, make it. Because that's just gonna open the doors for another idea or another piece. And so it has been, I had a real like slow period when I first moved here because I trashed all of my work coming here. I didn't want to show any more of it. I was tired of it. I'd been working out for like 7 years. And so when I came here, I was like, what is it that I care about? And that was like a weird spot to be in. And it wasn't until I started making this work in the last 2 years that I have never felt a lull in my creative process. Because even if I start something, like I've got like 4 pieces in the works right now. But I think it's if I have to, Alex cares about, what keeps you motivated? Motherhood or my art? My identity and my purpose and how I function as a person now, it changes constantly with the stages that my son goes through. So he's almost 2, right? He's becoming more independent. Now I'm becoming more of his playmate and his disciplinarian, right? And I'll share this image because this is what I'm kind of doing right now.
So Alex, while you're pulling that up, I'm gonna give you a comment. So Dan McGowan wrote, "This is amazing stuff as a non-nursing male. I do find this enlightening. I can't believe how industrial looking those nursing pads look. They fit that blue collar idea perfectly."
Oh, thank you. Artists just make art it's nice to have a pat on the back or affirmation that you're going in the right direction. So thank you. That's awesome. As a non-nursing male. I have heard that if you have nipples, you can be milked. All right, we're gonna move on.
This is the newest work.
Yeah, so this is what I'm working on right now. This is like one of the 3 pieces. So those nursing pads are in process. And I'm playing catch up on those. I only have 3 months worth in those pictures, but this is a performance. I'm going to call it a performance piece. It's performative because I'm performing an action, but it's actually involving my son. And so these are stills from a video I shot. So what's happening in this is they're building houses across the street from me, like these, like just like real quick. They can build a house in like 30 days now. And so I've been watching him build these houses and watching the stages. And I've been real obsessed with like the framework for a house, which goes back to my work before I ever had a kid, when I was using drywall and 2x4s and stuff like that. And so I had planned out like, okay, at every stage, like major stage of these buildings, as they build these houses, I'm going to take Fox out there and we're going to interact in these spaces. So this was like when they first kind of cleared the dirt and laid out the flask here, or the borders for where they're going to pour the concrete slab. And it was funny because like so my original idea was to go out there. You see this chair right here? Bought this chair from Walmart, and I was like, yeah, I'm gonna take him out here and I'm gonna nurse him in the middle of this this site. And it was like 7:30, I guess. So it's way after like the guys have gone and left. And that kind of references like this aspect again of time and going after 5 o'clock, going beyond the 8-hour workday, and how my duties as a nursing mother never stop really. But he like he didn't care about nursing. He didn't want anything to do with me. So I ended up just chasing him around and keeping him safe. Like he was like trying to go over here and there's like ant piles everywhere. So I ended up just kind of chasing him around, which I thought was really interesting. Because it turned out that I was like, oh, I'm not just here for nourishment anymore. I'm here to protect you and play with you and entertain you. And so now all of a sudden this work is starting to investigate all my roles as a parent. And I think that's what I mean by saying like, I'm not just talking about motherhood and nursing anymore. Strictly, I'm still talking about those things, but I'm now talking about it from just a parent standpoint, which I think brings in an entire other audience, right? Like you can relate to this now.
Yeah.
So, chasing your kid.
I watch my little one do daring and dangerous things all the time. And then Christy and I look at each other and like, do we stop her or do we let her get hurt? And then she never gets hurt, so she just keeps pushing it.
Right. You're like, hope this isn't the one when it happens. Yeah. And it's funny that I think the other part of this, like we value an 8-hour workday. We value clocking in, clocking out, and it's measurable, right? It's quantitative. And as a parent, as a mom, because that's what I am, I'm like, this is obviously a 24-hour job all the time. I knew what I was getting into. I know that's not new. That's nothing new, but man, this is a new experience for me. And I think translating that into a society that doesn't really value that. And it's funny because this whole pandemic, people are having to stay at home and homeschool their kids, take care of their kids, and entertain their kids all day. Like this is all of a sudden becoming like, oh, wow, we should value this more, or we should pay those people more that deal with our kids all day long. Right. So.
Yeah. All right. So what's interesting about that is I'm curious about how your work is going to change now. Because a lot of the work so far has been about, we're going back to the idea of the blue collar. So, you go to work, you pump, you go home, you pump, you feed, and now it was sort of the experiment of, well, I'm going to nurse him in the sort of the framework of the home. Mm-hmm. But what ended up happening is now you're trying to protect him. Now you're home all the time. And so like, how do you think, like, do you have any ideas of where the work's going to go now? Because it seems like life has sort of changed. Mm-hmm. So I don't like the idea of calling it the new norm, because I don't know that this is the new norm, but how do you see the work evolving now?
I think that I'm really interested to see where that, like those 4 still shots I just showed you, that's going to be a continuing piece until that house is done being built. So we're going to keep revisiting. Actually, they just poured the foundation yesterday. And so I think if it doesn't rain today, we're going to go out there this afternoon when all the guys are gone. And here's the thing, like, I don't know how it's going to go, because it depends on how my role as a caretaker changes and how that evolves. And that's directly related to all of this. I'm going to show you this other piece because this is another one that I have in the works, and I'm waiting on, so we're getting ready to build a playhouse for him. And so we have a bunch of 2x4s, and I'm planning on, like, once that framework is built, I'm actually going to do this performance in that framework for the house and the studs. So this piece is called Clocked In, and I have yet to actually perform this piece. So this was documentation for a proposal, but I basically made this bucket right here, and I'm wearing my coveralls. So this was in downtown Conway. I found this scaffolding. I was like, oh my God, that's where I want to shoot this. Like, and it's got, so I made this bucket that has a tap, and this is going to be filled with milk. It's a 5-gallon bucket, and it's just going to drip onto my forehead slowly, like over the course of however long I can take it. So kind of referencing like, what is it? It's called water torture, Chinese water torture. But so it references again, the monotony of that monotony of parenthood, and it can be boring, and it is repetitive, but also making reference to like that blue collar aspect too, by using scaffolding, by using a 5-gallon bucket, by wearing coveralls. Although I think this one might be better nude since it's summer. But I'm planning on working on that. So yeah. All
right. So I have a question.
Yeah.
And we're running a little bit short on time, but I want to ask this question because this is to me, this is kind of a difficult question. But so in my time, like, I had a graduate professor that once said that the hardest thing that you can do is turn the camera on yourself. And so, you're talking about doing a piece nude, which we already saw some pieces where you were nude, but we don't see anything.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how hard was it to make work where you actually turned the camera on yourself? Because, the photograph of you sitting on the meat's interesting because you're talking about sort of what happens to the body through pregnancy, post-pregnancy, and then like consumption and, how you're perceived. And then now you're moving into like more work. So how hard was it to decide to say, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to turn the camera on myself and I'm going to approach it from this perspective?
I didn't find it hard because I knew that was the right thing to do. It seemed like the most appropriate point. And, trying to find a model. I did work for a little bit before this where I was casting women's hands in beeswax and thinking about women in the workforce, things like that. So I was using models, but man, it's hard to deal with that. And it is autobiographical, right? So it just seemed appropriate for me to use myself as the subject matter. And I can also, I will say one other thing that, like, my husband, Stuart, he's like such an incredible support system and helper. And like, we had set up the camera in here or in the garage, like on the overhead shots for those photos. And we had set up my TV on the AV cart and like we hooked up through an HDMI cable. So what I could see the shot that we were going for. And so I could say, yeah, right there. Okay, take it. Or I need to move over this way. So I was also helping direct, but he's my tech guy and he's just so supportive. So I couldn't have done it without him. But yeah, it just seemed like the right thing to do. It wasn't hard to do that. It was hard to see like the photos. I'm like, oh my God, I need to start working out. But I think what I liked about that meat photo, which is the one that's on like the ads for this, is like Logan, our colleague Logan, was like, is that like your shoulders like from back here? And I was like, no, man, it's my stomach. So I liked that, how you can't really tell what part of the body it is.
Yeah. All right. So as we're rounding out time, I have one other question. I'll make a comment first. So if you guys have any other questions out there, let us know now. And then we will get those answered. Oh, it looks like we have one. What courses do you teach?
Yeah, so I teach 3D foundations. I teach upper level sculpture classes that like mold making, casting, objective sculpture. I teach a performance art class every other year, and I have taught concepts in the artistic process. So how to think about work, how to make work from concept.
Awesome. All right. Here's my final question, and we can round this out.
Okay.
How do you know when a body of work is finished?
There's an odd number of things. I don't know, actually like an odd number. I like odd numbers. It's just, you just know. All I know is, let me tell you something. All I know is that those ritual images, that's the only body of work for or series that's completed for me. Everything else, like the milk bags, I have another piece that I'm working with. Like I've got plexiglass boxes back there that I'm gonna use those for something, dealing with the milk bags. The nursing pads aren't done. One other thing I'll show you guys is this. Sorry, I'm gonna share my screen. Is this piece. So these are, and again, all parts of the buffalo. These are off prints of like when I stamp the nursing pads with the axle grease, and then whatever's left on the stamp from the times and things this is that. And so I was like, these are interesting. I'm going to use these. So these are another series that I'm working on based off of the nursing pad series. And they're basically going to be framed out to the dimensions of a time card, like a punch card. And I'll have at least 10 of them. So I don't know. When you're tired of doing it, maybe. I don't want to be repetitive. That's the thing. I don't want to ever be redundant. So that's how I know when it's done, when it feels redundant.
Well, Alex, do you have any last comments? And then I'll thank you for your time.
No, I mean, this was great. Thank you so much for having me. And I would also like to say, if there's anybody watching, that you don't always have to know exactly what you're doing at every given point. I think that's really important to feel lost in order to know what you're good at. And for some people it comes later in life. And I feel like I'm finally hitting my stride just in the last few years. And I think I'm in my mid 30s, and then that's okay. It's okay for that to happen. You don't have to be a rock star from like day one. So it's all about feeling confident in your work and believing in it. Yeah.
Alex, thanks. I appreciate it. So in a few weeks, the deal was I was going to interview Alex about her work, and in turn, she's going to talk to me about my work. So this is something Alex and I have done a couple of times over the last few years, as we both try to work through problems in our own bodies of work. So pay attention, check out Edwards Live, and see what's coming, because in a few weeks I'll be talking. Next week becomes orientation week, so we've got some fun stuff ahead for the Edwards College. And yeah, so Alex, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thanks for the time. And if anybody has any questions about Alex's work, feel free to reach out to her. She's easy to find on the university website, and I think she checks her email. I'm sure she does.
I check my email frequently.
Awesome. All right,
can I plug?
Yeah.
If you want to follow me, I'm on Instagram at Nadia Knox is my handle. So I'm not on Facebook, but I'm on the Insta.
All right.
Hey, thanks so much, Easton. This was fun.
Oh no, it's been my pleasure. So, all right, guys, thanks again, and we will see you next.